Christ is risen. So as I was preparing for this talk, or sort of trying to prepare for this talk about monastic hospitality, I was wondering where my starting off point would be. And of course, I could only offer my own experiences from being in the monastery until I came across very timely, and we could say a providential quote that was, kind of fell into my lap about a week ago, that not only helped inform what I'm going to talk about, but actually gave the structure to the talk as well. So, and the title, of course. So the quote is, I'll read to you in full, and it comes from St. Iacovos of Evia, who's a contemporary holy elder and saint, who reposed, I think, in the 1990s. So he's very much a man of our time, and a contemporary of such greats as St. Paisius and St. Porphyrius. So the quote is, "Many people and crowds will come to find rest, and you, the future monks, will give rest and spiritual comfort to the world. And you know why? Because you, the future monks, will not be ascetic like us. You will talk much, but accomplish very little. And this is what you must do. You must serve the needs of the people of God. And since you will not be a great ascetic, you will be saved through the virtues of love and hospitality. The future monks of the 21st century must pay attention to three things. When people visit your monastery, you must offer them these three things: one smile, one glass of water, and one good word." And this is the topic of the title of the talk: a smile, a glass of water, and a good word. A look at monastic hospitality. So, since the earliest of times, hospitality has been a virtue practiced by the monastics. Why has this come around? Because, of course, monasticism, as inherent to the name, monachos, means somebody who seeks to be alone, a loner, somebody who seeks to leave the world behind and commune with God in the silence of the desert or the wilderness or the forest. So why did hospitality for visitors become such an important part of the monastic life? Well, if we look back at the earliest times of monasticism, and even to the present day, there was many people who desire to spend time with these monks, to learn from them, to experience their way of life. And there's generally different kinds of people who would come. The most common, thankfully, are those who are seeking spiritual counsel. And as you can see from the lives of the Desert Fathers and others like them, there was always people who followed the monks into the desert to learn from them, to seek their wisdom. There's some who seek to just simply join the brethren in prayer and attend the services in a monastic environment, which is generally more peaceful than a parish. There is unfortunately what we'll call spiritual tourism, people who are what we'll call spiritually inclined, but not necessarily seekers of the true faith, and they want to just come and see what it's like. And again, this goes back to the earliest days of monastic life, when many people of the ancient Greco-Roman world would come and find out what these monks were up to after hearing about their exploits. And there's, of course, simple curiosity. The locals who hear there's a monastery nearby and want to go and see what's going on there. All of these people, despite their motives, where they came from, why they want to be there, were all treated well and looked after. And hospitality and love towards these people became paramount for the monks. So basic rules of monastic hospitality began to develop, and you can see these in the Typicon and in the lives of the saints, how they put them into practice. So some of the basic ones that are effectively the same everywhere is that for 3 days after their arrival, they have no responsibilities. Everybody has a blessing to stay for 3 days in which they will not have to work. They will not have to contribute in any way to the life of the community. They are there simply as guests. They come to pray, to come to the divine services, to talk to the monks, to simply immerse themselves in the life of prayer, which is at the monastery. If anybody wishes to stay longer, of course, they must seek a specific blessing for that reason. They must speak to the abbot. They must tell him why they wish to stay for longer, and most of the time they will receive that blessing. However, once you stay for longer than your 3 days, you must start partaking in the life of the community and its work. So generally, people who ask to stay for maybe another week, a couple of weeks, maybe longer time, as they want to experience the spiritual life in a bit more depth, they will be assigned to help the monks out in their obediences. Maybe be assigned to help clean the kitchen, help set tables. Nothing too laborious for the visitors, but they must help out in some way and contribute to the life of the community. However, because of the certain considerations that we need to have for the state of the modern world, people who come to the monastery and seek to stay there for longer periods of time, we need to think about the effect that their arrival might have on the community. Now, of course, this has always been with us to a greater or lesser degree, but nowadays there are certain social problems as well that are becoming more and more paramount, and monasteries need to, despite the fact that we are called to offer hospitality to everybody, we also need to consider the effect that this person's presence might have on the spiritual monastic life, the quiet, prayerful atmosphere, etc. So unfortunately, this doesn't happen too much in my experience, but there is occasions where people with serious drug problems and alcohol addiction come to the monastery. People with very serious mental health issues come to the monastery. And of course, people that are in a state like that, they are seeking help. And spiritual help is what we all need. So they've come to the right place in a sense. But is every monastery equipped to deal with these people and their problems? Some monasteries are in fact very well equipped to deal with them. Others are not. So the spiritual leadership of the monastery needs to make the consideration if this person can come here and work towards spiritual, mental and physical healing in the monastic community. From my experience, we are willing to take these people in at my monastery as long as we have some kind of references beforehand that the people are on their way. However, we have had some people just turn out in the middle of nowhere. One morning I was walking to church and I noticed in the reception room there was a person sleeping on the seats. I just noticed him and I thought, how peculiar. And turns out that he had decided that he's going to get clean, and he drove all the way from New York City, which is almost 5-hour journey. He arrived about 2 o'clock in the morning. There's obviously nobody around because everybody was sleeping, and decided to sleep on the seat, and then came to the church and he says, I'm come here to live at the monastery and get off drugs. And he was quite frazzled in his state, and obviously we were not prepared to take somebody at such short notice because we have no idea who this person is. Other people who are part of parish communities and things like that and have issues and are known to priests, they can be recommended to us and we can take them on, and we have helped some people. Sometimes they need more help than what we're able to offer. We're not specialists in this. But this is a matter of discernment for the abbot and his council, and sometimes they might say, well, this person is not going to cause too many problems, they should be fine, or this person seems is going to be very disruptive, or they might think he's fine and after a while he does turn out to be disruptive and they say, yeah, this is too much. Because ultimately the first purpose, the main purpose of monastic life is to seek God in prayer and in the church services and in the silence of the spiritual life. And if there are people there who are causing serious disruptions to that, if we are not able to do those things, then everything else will start to kind of fall apart. So these considerations be taken into account. So the examples of monastic hospitality going back in history, we can see why it's such an important aspect of the monastic life. The desert fathers, of course, as we read in their lives, were always entertaining, if you will, guests who came to them, and they always gave them a good word and some good spiritual advice to send them on their way. One of the great examples of monastic hospitality is St. Paul of Thebes, who is considered to be the first monk. He was actually a monk before St. Anthony the Great. And in the story in the life of St. Anthony, where he sought out to find St. Paul in the desert, St. Paul told him that a raven was bringing him a loaf of bread every day. So when the raven came at the same time that day to his bread, he broke the bread and he shared it with St. Anthony. And in most monastic trapezoes, there is the icon of St. Paul and St. Anthony breaking bread together in there to reflect this common life that monastics are leading and offer people to share in. In the Ladder of Divine Ascent by St. John Climacus, there's the wonderful story of all the pilgrims coming to St. Catherine's Monastery for the feast day, and the monks are obviously looking after all these pilgrims. They're setting the tables for the big meal, and they notice a very young man running around looking after them, wearing Jewish attire, as it says in the ladder, which obviously monks don't wear. and people were questioning, who is that person? Is he a local worker or something? Because he's very, he's giving orders, he's setting all the tables, he's making sure things are done properly. And I don't know who that is. And it turns out it was Moses himself. Had come to help the brothers on the mountain where he had seen God. So Moses himself was helping the monks offer hospitality. So when we get a lot of pilgrims coming, we are quite confident that we can always deal with this wave of people because our patron saints are assisting us invisibly. And then there's the beautiful story of Mount Athos, which is recounted, I think, in one of St. Paisius' books. I think it's Athonite Matters. Athonite Elders and Athonite Martyrs, I think it's called, but it could be a different book. But there was a story of one of the monasteries during a time of drought and near famine, and there was not much resources. They had very little in the cellar, as it were, for the brotherhood. Yet there was other monks coming from the wilderness, and the other laymen who were on the mountain for whatever reason were coming and asking for food because there was nothing available in the monks. They kept giving and they kept giving, and some of the monks complained and they says, we're not going to have anything left if we're going to starve if you keep looking after these people. But the elder says to them, as long as you keep giving, you'll keep receiving. And of course that's paraphrasing our Lord's words, freely given, freely receive. So the monks there, the more spiritually mature of them, were quite confident that it doesn't matter how much food we have in the larder, as long as you're giving to those who need it, God will give you what you need, and He'll multiply that which is already there. So why be hospitable then? Why bother? Well, hospitality, as we learned quite beautifully yesterday from Father Mark's talk, is an act of selfless love and a recognition of the image of God in others. So, as we know, all men are made in the image of God, and we therefore must recognise that in people. Everyone is an icon of Christ. So we must show that the necessary love towards them that we should have for God Himself. And of course, hospitality is when the love becomes selfless. As Father Mark pointed out yesterday, you have to push yourself. It might be difficult to be there for people when they need it. It might be time consuming, it might be laborious, it might be even emotionally demanding. But we must not put ourselves first, but the others. And simply, it's a commandment. We must be hospitable. As it says in St. Paul's Epistle to the Hebrews, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. And again, as Father Mark mentioned yesterday, he explained that there's there's no glory in offering hospitality to an angel or a saint or Christ Himself if He comes to you. But if a beggar or a poor person or one of the others, as the word xenos means, in philoxenia, if you love the others, or if you show love towards the others, unknown people, then that's a virtue. It's easy to love your own, easy to love the monks in your brotherhood, it's easy to love the people from your parish, but the strangers who turn up out of nowhere, to show love towards them, to show hospitality towards them is a greater thing. So, as he says, the entertaining angels unawares, sometimes God sends people to us that we must look after. And I'm pretty sure there's been a few occasions at the monastery where we've had strange and mysterious people come to visit us, and by simply showing them the hospitality and love that we show for everybody, these strange people, have given us a great blessing just by their presence. One person who I don't think was an angel, I'm pretty sure he wasn't an angel, he came to me. I was preparing the kitchen for breakfast on a Friday night. I was breakfast duties on Saturdays and when I was a novice, and I was always prepared the tables on the Friday night, and a man comes in out of the rain, soaking wet, and he turns up, and so, have you reserved a place in the guest room? And he says, I've just come. Somebody told me to come here and find a room for the night. I thought, okay, I'll see what I can do. Take a seat, I'll get you a drink, some food. And I called one of the fathers who was in charge of the guest house, and I said, well, if somebody's just turned up, can you accommodate him? He said, yeah, we'll get him a room, just look after him for a few minutes. So I sat with him and spoke. It turns out, he wasn't an angel, as far as we're aware. He was a time traveller. And I thought, oh, how nice. So I took a seat next to him and asked about his time travelling. So, and he told me. And he stayed with us for 3 days. And after that we told him, well, if you stay any longer, you're going to have to start working. But he says, well, I should be on my way now. So he's with us for 3 days, and very strange character to have around. But of course, I think showing patience and love, and maybe just a bit of a sympathetic ear to this man was of great benefit to us. I didn't feel he was dangerous by any means. Although when we drove him to the guest house, a police car shot past, and for a moment we were thinking maybe they're looking for him. But we were fine. So maybe he travelled to another century after leaving us, and who knows. But so people come to the monasteries because we have to remember that not just what we will call normal people. Most of us who are so-called normal are not normal at all. But some very strange people do come to monasteries because people who are on what we'll call the fringes of society, God has drawn them to Him for their salvation and to be saved and for their healing. So the monasteries and the churches are natural places where they will come. Before I came to Orthodoxy, and especially before I joined the monastery, I'd never really encountered what people will call crazy folk before. But now that I've lived at the monastery for over a decade, I really have a great experience of dealing with these people, because it's the best place for them. So sometimes they make their way to us, and sometimes they might very well be angels. So when we get these people coming to us, and any people of course, as St. Iacovos advises, give them a smile, a glass of water and a good word. So what is a smile? Well, it's very important for us to make people feel welcome when they come to the monastery. Anybody who comes to the monastery needs to be made welcome. For the majority of people who visit monasteries, some people are very experienced with coming to monasteries and all that's almost like second nature to them. They've been doing it for many years. But for the majority of people, it could be their first time, and even if it's not their first time, it's still not overly familiar to them. So when you're in an unfamiliar environment, you become self-conscious. You feel vulnerable. Especially, when there's a whole bunch of people dressed in black robes, walking around very determinedly, knowing exactly what to do. Ringing the bell to go to lunch. Everybody stands, they sit down after the prayer. It's very regimented, it's very disciplined. The church services, we all stand in different places. Everybody seems to know what they're doing in the services, and people are it's quite different to being in a parish, because the monastic services are very organised in a sense, because everybody knows exactly how to behave in church. So they feel self-conscious and vulnerable, think, they're all looking at me, these monks, because there's always that idea that, they're going to be judging me or anything. And I'll let it be done just now. We don't, maybe some people do, but the majority of us, we don't really pay attention to how people behaving in church or anything like that. We just kind of mind our own business. But people do feel very self-conscious and very vulnerable, and especially if they're not even Orthodox, they've just come for a visit, or they're coming to inquire or find something out. We need to make sure that you're welcome here. We're going to show love towards you. You're not going to be treated at arm's length. We're here to embrace you and welcome you to our community for however long you seek to be here. So the smile is very important. And monks are very, have a reputation of being very stone-faced and serious people. But we are allowed to smile, and we must, as St. Iacovos tells us. So, although I don't like this term, the so-called orthodoxy in diaspora, orthodoxy has no homeland other than heaven. So our diaspora is the entire world, I suppose. But orthodox outside of its, traditional areas of the world, Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and the Middle East, we have to deal with quite different cultural expectations from the people. So of course people who have lived and grown up in Greece, or in Syria, or in Serbia, Russia, Ukraine, where there's monasteries everywhere, people know a lot about monasticism. They know a lot about monks and how they are. They know how to behave, more or less, when they go to monasteries. They know what to expect. But when you start a monastery in England, or France, or America, these people are not used to orthodoxy. These people are not used to monasticism in the same way that we understand it. So we ourselves, as Orthodox Christians, even if we are natives to these other countries, we need to be, quite sensitive to local sensibilities and cultural expectations, for example. And I'll get back to that in a little moment, from what I experienced from being in America, for example. But there's quite a common phrase that floats around in Orthodox circles, and quite a lot of radical new people are into it. Death to the world, which of course we do. We accept, as long as we know what the world actually is, being the passions. But when we accept the idea of death to the world and fighting against the world and rejecting the world, It doesn't mean being antisocial. The world is the passions, it's the fallen things of the world, but the people who live in this world, we must accept, we must show love towards. So, being antisocial is not necessarily part of the monastic vocation. However, the reality of the monastic vocation is that some people are simply not people. I'm pretty much a people person. I like to talk to people. As St. Iacovos says, I talk much but achieve very little. But I'm honest in that. To be a monk is somebody who is, seeks to be alone. Now, of course, I like and appreciate solitude. I like being in my kelia, I like reading my books, I like praying in my prayer corner. But I don't mind interacting with other people. And I must, now that I'm a priest monk. It's an obedience for me. But some monks, they just don't like it. And that's the thing about monastic life. When you enter into this spiritual life and you advance, it sort of intensifies your predispositions. If you're a sociable person and you engage in the monastic life, you become a sociable monk. And it can be a good thing, or it can be a bad thing. If you do everything with discernment and discretion, being a sociable monk can be very beneficial to people who come to the monastery, and such monks are usually the ones who are assigned to deal with visitors. If you're not a people person to begin with, and you just kind of like being left alone, when you join the monastery, that becomes even more intense, and you tend to eschew any sort of contact with people, and you get people like that, and you have to respect them. But even those people, if they have a good disposition within them, even if they don't like being around people, they will still show love towards those they meet. Even if they don't speak to them, they might say, or they might give them a nice facial expression, even if not a smile. But they might smile to them and bow their heads and then carry on. And it shows that they're being acknowledged, the person's being friendly in their own way, but they want to be left alone to pray. And that's fine. But some people don't quite understand that. So that's why we, definitely in non-Orthodox cultures, we definitely need people who are able to engage with the locals and on their own terms, in a sense. Now, in monasteries nowadays, there's something that's becoming a more and more bigger factor, is the presence of children. Now, a loving smile from a monk is very important when children are involved. So nowadays monasteries really need to pay attention to not only the presence of children, but the care of the children. Because children are impressionable, young people are impressionable, everybody's very impressionable, of course. And any impressions that they have of you as a monastic will affect how they look at monks and monasteries for the rest of their life. If some small child is at the monastery and makes a little bit of a loud noise, and a monk berates them and tells them, be quiet, you child, that might put them off monasteries for the rest of their life, and maybe even the church. So as we know, in parishes we need to look after children, be patient for them, be patient towards them. Likewise in the monasteries, obviously monasteries are more disciplined and more still and more peaceful than parishes, and we try to maintain that. And children are generally not those things, but we love them, and they are the future of the church, and we need to really look after them. And nowadays, as more and more people are sort of kind of trying to detach themselves from mainstream society because they've just had enough of it, they move to rural areas to be close to monasteries where they can raise their families in a more normal environment, with next to a place which has regular church services, the full cycle of the church's liturgical life, the feast days, and they can become part of a very serious, prayerful community. We've experienced this at our monastery. The monastery in Essex has a very big community growing around it. This is a good thing in some ways, although people shouldn't really abandon parishes. But if people choose to live close to monasteries, that is not a bad thing. But with these serious people, and most of which are actually young couples from my experience, they bring children with them, and generally have lots of children. And so we saw the number of children at my monastery multiply from when I arrived, from about maybe a dozen and a half, maybe 15, 18 children, to about 60 in a couple of years, with many pregnant mothers expecting more. So we had a lot of children, and with a lot of children can come a lot of noise and other things, but we need to be patient with them. You can't just chase them out of church. We can't make the mothers feel unwelcome. We need to let people know that in our temple, at our monastery, you are welcome to be here, and we like having children here. We like having families here. This is a good thing. So it's a worthy sacrifice for us to make as monastic communities, for the sake of the spiritual life of these people. If we can put up a little bit of noise on Sundays. Bear in mind that the rest of the week, when we have the very early liturgies, at the early hours of the morning, we don't get children at those. We can have them peace and quiet 6 days of the week. If we can just tolerate a little bit of noise during Sunday liturgy, we're going to gain a lot from that, because the presence of these little angels in their prayers are very beneficial to us, and the future of our church is built on the faith of the young. And if they get a good impression of the monastery, they have a good spiritual and Christian formation in the monastic community, these will become very good Christians in the future. And who knows, these children might be our future bishops, our future priests, our future monks, nuns, or just simply good, upstanding Orthodox Christians who pass on the traditions to their children. Monasteries are not parishes. However, we can and do allow certain parochial things to take place within our monastic quarters. So we don't have a parish council, thankfully. There's no need for that. But we do not take part in it ourselves, but we allow a Sunday school for the children. We allowed the married priests who lived nearby and who taught in our seminary, and the other young families, to organise a school for the children, because obviously we function as a parish on their behalf, but we don't have the requirement to have a school and have a sisterhood and all those things. We don't have a sisterhood. The monks make the meals, the monks do all the cleaning and everything. So we need to allow some sort of aspects of parish life to exist. So we have the schools for the children, and other things that take place in our community. We allow certain of our buildings to be used for other events that the parish, or the parishioners, in a sense, we prefer to call them neighbours, because we're not parish. So we allow them to do things inside the seminary building, inside our other kind of buildings we have at the monastery. Very often when our community comes together, because they came from quite big distances, some of them, we allowed them to use our seminary hall for birthday parties for the children, or other events. So when we baptised babies, we had lunches and things like that, especially for all the families in the hall. So we allow things like this to take place, and to show that we're a community that welcomes you, and you can have your Orthodox parish life here alongside us, and we're happy for you to do that. And if they feel welcome, then that will make it easier for other people to come and join and partake in that as well. So people's experiences of the monastery and what we'll call their spiritual openness really hinges on the smile in many cases. A bad response to somebody when they come to the monastery, a grumpy monk, somebody who's having a bad day, that can spoil their entire visit and can really turn them off the monastery, even the church. If somebody's seeking the Orthodox faith and they say, there's a monastery down there, we'll go and ask them about the faith, and they have a bad experience, that's it, they're gone. And it's the same in parishes as well. So to that end, many monasteries designate specific what we'll call greeters, who will engage with the pilgrims or visitors. There's pilgrims who come for specifically spiritual reasons, and then there's visitors or inquirers, and even, God forbid, tourists who sometimes stop by. So we can nominate certain people who will deal with them. These are the monks who are able to season their words with salt, who are a bit more open to others, friendly, engaging, able to answer questions. And also, conversely, we can limit who speaks to pilgrims, and we can say to monk so-and-so, don't talk to anybody who comes here, for their salvation and for yours. And so some monasteries, the monks are just not allowed to talk to people. Our monastery is not like that. We were founded in a very specific way. That means we're more of a community than in certain other places. So Elder Ephraim's monastery in Arizona is quite notorious that the monks there head down, don't even look at visitors, because they do get a lot of visitors all the time. The monks don't speak to them. There is usually one monk at the gate, and I think one monk in the bookstore who talks to them, and that's it. And anybody who's got a blessing to show people around. Other monks do not talk to them. Our monastery was founded in 1930, so we're almost 100 years old. So this was just after the Russian Revolution. So we did have a lot of refugees arriving in America, but we also had the people who had arrived in the United States prior to the war, what was called the old immigration. Mostly people coming from the Austro-Hungarian Empire and from 1850s onwards. And so there was a lot of people who were now kind of native Orthodox in America, and they had very many monasteries. So when Father Pantaleimon, who's the founder of Jordanville, he founded his monastery in 1930, he said specifically, this is going to be an open monastery. So we don't have a wall around the monastery like many places do. Our doors are never locked. Thankfully, nothing's ever happened to us. But our monastery was founded specifically not only to be a place of repentance and prayer and spiritual life, but a place of retreat for the community. Our intention from the very beginning was a place that people could come to receive spiritual refreshment, to come and to deepen their faith, to experience orthodoxy in its native environment, in a sense, in a monastery and in a spiritual community. They needed that because they didn't have anything like that for many, many decades in the United States. So to that, from that point on, our monastery has always been open. So the monks were, free to, unless of course they were specifically told not to, which is the case for some people. But the monks would be talking to people, giving a good word, some friendly interactions with them. And because our monks who founded our monastery and the ones who kind of built it up over the decades were very simple people. Most of them are from peasant stock. Some had suffered greatly in their lives, and those who escaped the Soviet Union. Some had been in gulags and things like that. So they were able to share in the trials and tribulations of people who were in the world and struggling with things, and many of them had similar experiences. So it was good for people to be able to interact with monks like that. So we have that openness at our monastery, but at the same time, we do have people who are assigned to deal with visitors and to point them in the right direction, give them the advice they need, because people need that. People need a bit of guidance so they can navigate around this huge complex of strange-looking buildings with strange-looking people, with strange-looking words written on the wall, in foreign languages. So they need to be able to somebody to show them around. But people like that in the monasteries who are, what we'll call the greeters, for want of a better term, they need to be able to deal with basic spiritual and theological inquiries. Nobody's asking you to know dogmatic theology inside and out. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but I can point to somebody who does know the answer to that. But the monks who are assigned to look after pilgrims and visitors, they need to have a sense of spiritual maturity, where they can, they can tell you some things, but not give spiritual advice in the same way that an elder would, or one of the confessors. Generic things like, you should pray, or you can fast twice a week, this is good. Things like that, no problem. When you start saying, well, I think, you should do this, and that's a problem. So, but you need discernment, who to choose to do this. But somebody who has a level of spiritual maturity, can read a book, and, knows a little bit about what the Orthodox Church actually believes, and can explain to people things, well, yeah, this is what we believe about this, that and the other, this is why we have icons, and if you need to know anything else, I can maybe you get to speak one to the priest. All it takes is somebody with discernment and a little bit of humility, and they can make a very good impression and have a good connection with people who come. A receptivity and hospitality at the monastery should always be balanced with the need to maintain the monastic spirit. So, of course, we should be welcome to anybody who comes and needs it, but like I said before, we need to exercise discretion and discernment. If certain people are disruptive, we need to ask them to kindly leave. Or sometimes we might say, oh wow, you want to bring 500 pilgrims? We can't do that. That's impossible for us. Now we get a couple hundred pilgrims come several times a year, but if you want to bring a huge group, of that size, we said no, we couldn't manage. We're sorry. You have to bring less people or look after yourselves. So at least once or twice a year, very big groups come to us for special occasions, and on those, because the groups are so big, the parishes themselves prepare all the food for the few days they come, and they give it to us in the kitchen, and then we distribute it on tables. So our monks just have to heat it up, because we're cooking, or we're preparing meals for, at that point, 500-600 people. So they bring there's the long tradition of them to bring the food to us. So that's big relief for us, because it would be just simply too much, because not only do we have to cook the food, but we have to do the services and all the things that are involved in looking after the pilgrims. So sometimes we have to kind of have limitations, and also, not only limitations on who can come and who can stay to protect the monastic environment, but also ourselves personally, as Abbador of Theus says in his advice. He says, "Don't let your hospitality be an excuse for gluttony." So yes, you've got to offer hospitality to these people, offer them food, some nice treats and things like that. But don't use that as an excuse to overindulge yourself. So, more pilgrims, okay, more biscuits, more cakes, and come sit next to me. So you don't want that to happen. So you yourself need to have kind of discretion and discernment, and again, spiritual maturity, which is required for somebody who deals with visitors all the time. So the second thing that St. Iachuvos said was offer them a glass of water, and that doesn't seem like very much, really, but there's so much more to a glass of water than simply something you drink. As well as people's spiritual needs, hospitality at the monastery, of course, means looking after the physical and material needs too. So that's what he means by a glass of water. We need to look after them for the things that they need, food, comfort, refreshment, etc. Historically speaking, if you go back in time long enough, pilgrims probably walked many, many miles to reach their destination. Talk about the desert fathers, people would have walked through the desert to get to them. Or big pilgrimage centres, people would have travelled across continents to get there. As we know, there's in Western Europe, the Camino, where people walked all the way from Germany and France to the furthest reaches of Spain. And in the Holy Land, people walked all across Europe to get there, to visit the holy sites. And many people even died en route. So people went through a lot of suffering to get to holy places where the monks would be. Sometimes it would be monasteries, sometimes it would be shrines and things like this. So it was imperative for the monks that these people were able to refresh themselves once they arrived at the monastery. So monasteries started having places where the pilgrims could look after themselves, guest houses. This gave us the opportunity to kind of follow the example of Abraham and care for our guests. So one of the most beautiful and theologically the richest icon, I think, which is in our tradition, is the so-called Rublev Trinity, which isn't actually an icon of the Trinity per se, as we know, is the hospitality of Abraham, which is a symbol of the Trinity. It's a symbolic representation. But it's one of the most beautiful icons in the Orthodox tradition, and it's hospitality. So this extremely high theological principle that's there, it stems from hospitality. This revelation that's given to us comes from hospitality. And Abraham, he wasn't hosting angels unawares. God himself came to Abraham and he looked after him. So we can follow that example and look after the image of God, which is in all people, as they come to look after us. They come to visit us, rather. So the monastery guest houses, also known as the Arkantarike, are set aside for pilgrims' refreshment, and as a way of maintaining a distinction between monastics and laity. So obviously, monks have their own living quarters, the visitors have theirs, and theirs are generally less austere. The monks have their kelia, they have a bed, they have some books in there, and it's pretty simple. Generally, the guest houses are quite comfortable. There's nicer things than some guest houses at certain places have ensuite showers and things like that, baths for the guests. So there's more comfort for these people because they're not monks. Yes, they've come to the monastery to visit and they want to participate in our spiritual life and in our ascetic life and our community life. But at the same time, we shouldn't expect them to live like monks and live on a board or sleep on the floor or put up with bed bugs and things like that. Which we become very used to at the monastery. So we make nice quarters for them, we look after them, because it's one thing to say, they can deal with it. Well, yeah, maybe they can deal with it, but if you can make things comfortable for people, if you can show love for people by giving them treats, giving them nice bedding, why not? Why not clean their room for them? Why should they live in a dirty room? Yeah, maybe they can, but for us, we should go above and beyond to look after people and to care for them. That is part of the virtue of hospitality. So yes, they've come to visit the monastery, but don't expect them to subject themselves to the life that we monks subject ourselves to. The monastery's guest master, who cares for these people and sort of guides them, he has to be a man of great love, character and discretion, as well as spiritual and ascetic maturity. Again, as Abadora faces, do not let hospitality become an excuse for excess or gluttony. So the person who's the guest master, he has the keys to the safe full of the sweets. So if anybody's been to Mount Athos knows that the guest master is the one with the big bowl of Greek delights, leukumia, who shares it with people. And that's a big temptation, as we know. They're very tasty. So he could easily just skim off a little bit of that when nobody's looking. So somebody like that needs to have a bit of discretion and spiritual maturity to know that, I'm not going to eat the Turkish delight or the Greek delight. I'm going to leave it. And somebody who can welcome the guests, give them, like we said, a smile, a glass of water and a good word. A person that the first contact with is very positive. Now, our monastery, we don't have a guest master per se. Our guest house is actually about half a mile from the monastery. It's quite separate because obviously the way things are. We bought a house that was down the road from the monastery and we converted it into a guest house. So they come to the monastery and then they go back to the guest house to get their rooms. But so there's no monk at the guest house all the time. Other monasteries, the guest house is actually on the property of the monastery, and there is a monk there all the time. So we don't really have a guest master in that sense. So that's why the people who come to our monastery, and they come through the main entrance, they're met generally by the monks who work in the bookshop, which is sort of like the reception area. So they're the monks who are sort of semi-guest masters, at least in our monastery. But being a guest master, or being one of these people who looks after folk as they arrive, the greeters, it's a blessed obedience, because it involves not only the direct care of pilgrims and visitors, giving them a glass of water or a warm drink on a cold day, something to eat, arranging and cleaning the guest rooms, but also, as the first point of contact, that sets the tone for the rest of their experience of the monastery. So if they come and the guest master is an austere, dour person, it's going to be maybe an austere and dour visit. But if somebody welcomes them with open arms and a bright, cheery smile and a loving word and some leukomia, something nice to drink, we don't give rakia at our monastery. We're dry. We don't offer alcohol to anybody. But some monasteries do. If you show them that love and hospitality, then they're open. They're ready for a good spiritual experience at the monastery. If you are a rough person, then they close up and they won't become receptive to the grace of God which exists in the community life. And he can explain things to them, the service schedule, where they need to be at certain times, if they want to, because we give people complete freedom. Just because you visit the monastery, again, doesn't mean you need to keep the monastic schedule. Of course, it's recommended that you come to the services, and you should. It's a good thing for you. But if you just want to sit down and have some peace and quiet, or go for a walk, that's fine. You can also tell the points of contact. Speak to so and so if you want to go confession. If you want to know more about this, go to this person. They can even advise you the places to walk. If you want to take your prayer rope and go for a walk after the services or between the services, it's a nice route down there, or the lakes are over there. My monastery has 1,000 acres and many routes to walk through the hills and the forests. So we always tell people, it's very nice to go down there to get some peace and quiet and to pray. There's a beautiful chapel in the woods. You can venerate some of the icons that are on the outside. And also tell them what's at the monastery. We have the relics of these saints here. There's a miracle working icon. If your monastery has one, you should go there to say your prayers. We have the relics of the saints here. You should go there and ask for their intercessions while you're here at the monastery. Whatever things are notable about your monastery, or things that are going to be a very positive spiritual experience for them, that person can direct them to that, because not everybody's going to tell you, oh yeah, this is a miracle working icon or something. So you need somebody who's able to make that clear to people, that there's these great opportunities to experience the grace of God, to experience holiness. The monastery trapeza, where we have our meals, the dining hall, is open to all, with certain exceptions. So this is point 2 of my cultural sensibilities, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. So as I mentioned before, we need to have certain discernment about the cultural sensibilities of those around us, and then that also plays into certain people not being allowed to come to trapeza. So I'll get to that in a second, because it's a very, very interesting concept. But generally, my monastery, we open to everybody. We don't have any exceptions. Everybody's allowed to join in the communal meal of the Brotherhood to share in what is called a second church. So the trapeza is always seen as a second church. In some monasteries, they process liturgically from the Catholicon, the main church, to the trapeza for lunch after liturgy, and then they go back to say more prayers. So we finish the heavenly banquet of the divine liturgy, and then we go to have lunch afterwards, which is always generally the main meal at any monastery. And people come to participate in that. As we invite them to join in the Lord's Supper, we enjoin them to enjoy in the agape meal with us, which is an ancient Christian tradition, and obviously exists in parishes as well, where most people have at least some coffee and sandwiches afterwards. But looking after pilgrims in the kitchen is quite a demanding obedience. The cook and anybody who assists him, they have probably one of the most difficult obediences at the monastery, especially, as I mentioned before, when large groups of pilgrims visit. When extremely large groups come, like I said, they often bring their own food and they give it to us to share around. But when you have 200 or 300 people and we cook the meals ourselves, we have a big struggle on our hands. And those days in the kitchen are quite terrifying, especially when you think, wow, the liturgy seems to be going very fast today, and you haven't quite finished preparing the food. So, as an aside, I didn't do too many obedience as a cook. I used to do breakfast on Saturdays, which was pretty much as far as my cooking talents would go. That's why I was never in the kitchen very much. I was never the head cook. We had a rotating schedule on Sundays and feast days. There would be a 4 or 5 man team with one person who was the head cook. That was never me. I chopped vegetables and cooked and cleaned dishes. That was it. We put me in charge of the kitchen once and it was a disaster. So we tried again, and I tried to reverse all those mistakes that I made, but it went in the opposite direction. That was also a disaster of a different kind. So I'm useless. But going back to my time when I was in the Navy, we always used to hate the chefs. We didn't like them. I mean, the food's terrible. These guys don't do any work. But looking back from being in the monastery, and I look back to the chefs and I think, my word, those people, what they went through. Because when you think about it, the cooks work all the time around, and they don't really get much good feedback, because people like nice food, and I'll admit the monastery food is not always, gourmet, but it's made with prayer, which is very good, because people say that they always come to the monastery, and it's always very tasty. The food's simple, but it's always very tasty because it's made with prayer. So we eat simple food, but it's never bad. But when you're at the monastery all the time and you're having the same food all the time, you give all these. And it's the same in the Navy. We used to complain about the chefs, but those guys made good food. They actually made good food, and it was very high quality. But we were just complaining because that's the only thing you're allowed to do. You shouldn't complain at the monastery. Complain is a sin. So being a cook is not an easy obedience, because you're always going to get people complain, oh, there's too much salt, or that was too spicy, or that could have been a bit hotter. There's always somebody who's got something to say. So I don't envy the cook, and you have to exercise great patience. So it is a very special kind of diaconia, service to people, with many, many temptations in the kitchen. I think there's more demons living in the kitchen than anywhere else. But there is a very special grace at the same time. For those who work in the kitchen with patience and humility, it can become very good for them. It can become like a refining fire, literally, in the path of holiness. A less stressful place most of the time is the monastery bakery, which is a very special place in providing the pilgrims daily bread. I was the baker at the monastery, and we didn't have the fast-paced action of the kitchen, things like that. We went down there once or twice a week, we mixed our dough, put it in the proofer, went down a few hours later and baked it. Obviously, the closer you get to big feast days and things like that, you have to prepare lots of bread and you have to work around the clock. So it's very tiring. But when you're a baker, you can just sit there and read a book when it's baking. I mean, there's not very much, really hard work involved. It's a big blessing to work in the bakery. But because we got that extra capacity there, we're not chopping vegetables and making sauces and making salads. It's just mix the dough, roll the dough, let it rise, and bake it. So there's a lot of time stretched out over there. So you're just watching it, you can sit and read, but at the same time you've got that extra capacity, why not use it to treat people a little bit. So what I liked to do when I was in the bakery was to make shortbread for the pilgrims. Didn't do it all the time, but close to big feast days or big groups of people coming, I would make some shortbread, which is of course a Scottish dish. And I could share with people. I would make little bags of shortbread and give it to our families with the children, give it to the visitors, and they enjoyed it. We could make nice sweetbreads and things like that, people, if we had the time and ability to do it. So we could make different kinds of bread, experiment a little bit to make tasty things, and for the pilgrims, we made some special bread for your visit. So that was a big blessing to be in the bakery. I love very much being a baker, because you can put a little in for the people and you get a lot back, because they're very grateful, especially if the bread's tasty. They're very happy to have it. They always like come to the monastery and have the bread for some reason, and ask to take some home with them. So these small gestures do mean a lot, and I'm not talking about just giving nice food to people, but saying a nice thing to people, just being friendly. They have a huge effect on people. Again, because people are coming self-conscious and vulnerable into a spiritually intense environment. If they can meet at least one person who's nice to them, it makes a whole lot of difference. And it was a very there's moments like that where you can really see the importance of hospitality. When I was living in the dormitory with the students, I had my own office, which was like a promotion. I had my own fridge in there, so I kept it packed, because I quite strangely, for people, don't judge me, I don't drink tea or coffee. It's not my thing, and I don't drink alcohol either, which is always a good thing to do. So I only drink water, but water's boring. So I discovered in America, because they have an obsession with this stuff, flavoured seltzer water, which has no sugar in it but great taste. So I always had a fridge packed full of cold seltzer water for hot days and for visitors. So when we had people to come to visit, I would always offer them a cold seltzer. If they came to my office, we could sit and talk and have a nice cold drink. And people appreciated that, and people started to come more and more often to the office and spend time with you and ask questions and things like that. So if somebody came to the monastery once and you got a nice cold drink from you, next time they visited, they'd be like, let's see if Father Theodore's in his office. So it was good, and you ended up becoming close to these people and becoming friends, if you will. We had some sweets to get. People know I have a sweet tooth, so they send me, my mother, even when I was living with, she very occasionally would send me, care packages with sweets in them, like she did when I was in the Navy. And I would share these with people, especially little children, when somebody brings their kids to the monastery. There's a group that comes from a Sunday school, or just our own children that come every week. I would generally sneak a pack of sweets in my pocket to the trapeza after lunch and hand out sweets to the kids, and it's nice for them. It's probably the parents are not happy, but for them, you're a nice monk who gives them sweets. Therefore, this place is nice to come to. They have a good impression of the monastery. It's not bribery, honestly, but it's for them. Come to the monastery is nice. There's nice people. They do nice things, and our friends are here. So they have a very positive experience of the monastery. And it was very very touching, but also very sad time. When I was in the bakery and we had a bunch of extra dough, and we have a summer camp that comes to a monastery every year, the Summer Boys program. It's like 3 weeks long. Boys 14 to 18 years old come and live at the monastery and work alongside us and things like that. And it's our current Metropolitan of Rokar was a summer boy, so the program works. We have a lot of priests who graduated from it and things like that. They came for a few years and then they came to seminary and things like that. So it's a very good, positive experience. So I thought, well, let's, the boys are out doing some hard work in the afternoon because they help the monks with their obediences. We've got this dough. Let's take it up to the kitchen and let's fry it. Let's put some sugar on it, fry it, and give them some fried bread. So we fried some bread for them, and I was carrying the big vat of treats over to the boys, and there was a family who'd just turned up to the monastery and had a tiny little girl with them. And I said, take one of these, and she took a piece of fried bread and I patted her on the head and carried on. Shared the sweets with the boys, walked back to the bakery, and I saw the family again, and I said hello, and they smiled, and they said, oh, was that the monk that gave you the fried dough? And no, thank you very much. Nice experience. A week later, I was in the bookshop where I used to sometimes have obediences, and I saw the mother and the child again, the little girl, and I said, oh, I recognise him. I said, oh, hello, maybe it wasn't a week, maybe it was a very short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks max. But I saw them again, and I said, oh, how are you? I recognised them, and I said, oh, I don't have any sweets for you today, I'm afraid, sorry. And so it's fine. I said, oh, so what brings you back? And it turns out that the father had died, just after that visit, very suddenly out of nowhere. So they were back at the monastery, and I was quite saddened by this, of course. And so I sat down and spoke to them, because I already had that connection with them that I'd made from the previous week. So I sat down and spoke to them, and to this day I'm very close with that mother and the daughter to this day. So those little gestures that we make for people, they can go a long way. Because when they come to the monastery now, they'll, well, at least before I had to leave, they would always ask me for panikidas and things like that. So they had somebody at the monastery, they could say, well, their husband's buried there, pray for him, please have a panikida, they'd come to visit and things like that. So making those little gestures, they're good for people who come to the monastery, because they show that there's a little bit of love there from people, and that can flourish into something which is very positive for them. So for me, that was a very, very, very touching thing, and to become friends with these people, and that just became because I gave a little bit from the bakery to them. So it's very important for us to even apply this in our parish lives. People that we see, not just in the parish but anywhere, make small gestures for people. So, despite the necessity of providing for the physical needs of pilgrims, the cup of water that St. Iacovos talks about, and the food and the sweets and things like that we can provide them, and of course the place to rest and refresh and get washed and things like that, that is merely to support them in their search for an experience of the living water, which is of course Jesus Christ. Which brings us to the last thing that St. Iacovos wanted to talk about, a good word. So as we know, a good word in Greek, evlogia, which means a blessing. A good word is one of the most important things that we can give a pilgrim or a visitor, because yes, they come to the monastery and, but they don't come just to, drink water, have nice food, get things from the bakery. They come for an spiritual experience, and those other things are just merely there to make their time better. But the most important thing is to receive the Word of God when they come to the monastery, whether that's a good word from somebody here in the divine services, but they need to have an encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ when they visit. That's the most important thing. A good word, given with love from anybody at the monastery, or of course in general, many of these principles I'm talking about apply to anywhere, can stay with people for a lifetime. Many people who visit the monastery and will like to reflect on the old guard, the old monks who helped found the monastery and formed it spiritually into what it is nowadays. And they always talk about, Father so-and-so said this to me when I was a kid and I never got that, or this person gave me this advice, and it changed their life and it sticks with them forever. So people who have spiritual discernment and love for others, when they say something, it doesn't have to be like a prophetic word or anything, just a good piece of advice or a piece of encouragement, can actually stay with people forever. So we're not talking merely, seeking holy elders and things like that, of which there are very few, but just a simple, profitable and earnest spiritual conversation with a monk can be a transformative experience. And that's really why it's important for us to make time for people. If people want to come and talk to you and ask questions, don't say, okay, well, I've got a couple of minutes here, right? Well, we believe this, and this, and you should, fast and pray. Okay, see you later. Make time for people. Listen to them. See what they're asking. See where they're coming from with their questions. Get to know them a little bit, so you can give them, if you can, if you're able to, if you're blessed to, the right thing that they need to hear. And that can be an experience that changes their life. They can be, they can join the church because of that. They can become Orthodox. They can start taking the faith seriously, or they can really learn where God has taken them in their life just by something from you. And it's not you that's saying anything. It's God working through people who are trying to show love to others. Well, not everybody who visits the monastery is generally a spiritual seeker. You get so-called spiritual tourists, for example. Most people who come to the monastery are seeking something a bit deeper. But you get some people who come just to see what the services are like. People are quite not terribly interested. But nonetheless, people who don't come with a particular inclination to seek a deeper spiritual life or seek the truth, a good word said to these people, again, seasoned with salt, with love, can make a seeker out of anybody. Somebody who comes just to see, I heard there's some nice paintings on the wall inside that church of yours, or I heard you make good bread here. Well, okay, well, yeah, I can get some bread for you if you want. But sit down, and get to know this person, get to talk to him if he's willing to. And somebody like that could think, oh wow, these people are quite different, and there's something interesting here. Maybe I want to find out more. So people can walk away from the monastery with a decision to, I'm going to look into Orthodoxy because these people were different. They said things differently, they did things differently. Treating everybody with love always comes first and foremost. And of course there is no ulterior motive to hospitality. We're not good to people just to make them convert to Orthodox if they're not Orthodox, or people who come who are Orthodox. We're not nice and just hopefully this guy will become a monk. There is no ulterior motive to that. We show love to people because we must, because they need it. But nonetheless, we should always seek to plant the seeds of faith in anybody who comes to us. That's our job as Christians. We need to make people think more about God, about Jesus Christ, about growing in faith, about coming to know and have a knowledge of the truth. And that's what brings me to the thing I mentioned before about, having a bit of this discernment towards different cultures and who can come to Trapeza. So what's this got to do with planting the seeds of faith in people who come to us? Well, the example of some certain Athonite monasteries is quite interesting. As I said before, our Trapeza is open to everybody. And certain Athonite monasteries, not all of them, non-Orthodox have to leave the services. They're not allowed to attend. And then they can't come to the lunch afterwards. They can't come to the Trapeza. That's locked. After the meal, they can join in and they can have a meal. So I was told about this by somebody, and he says there's a reason for this. It's because they want these people to want more. They want them to see that you're not part of what we have. You're not part of our brotherhood. You're not part of our church. We have something that's not for you. But if you show these people love, they will realise that separation is something that they can overcome. they have to seek. So it's to create a desire in them. Now, it's a nice thing. It's an interesting principle, and you can get away with that in Mount Athos because people can only go to Mount Athos if they have a particular interest to go there and they've gone through the bureaucratic process of getting onto the mountain. So people who are on Mount Athos, they're already kind of at least well disposed towards what you have. If somebody was to come to the monastery in Essex or to my monastery in America and you say, yeah, sorry mate, you can't come to church, they're not going to come back. You can't really do that to people in the West. They're not used to that. People, if you say no to somebody, they'll be like, okay, they'll go. So we can't do that to people in the West. They're not ready for it. People become more sensitive nowadays. So something that seems like a little bit of a burden or a barrier or a hurdle to overcome, they go, okay, I can't do that. So we allow anybody to come to our chapels, and there's nothing wrong with that. But certain, like I said, strict monasteries, they have a line, and it's to show people that there is a distinction here. But nonetheless, those people, as I've been told, I never went to any of those monasteries that did that, or that I know of at least. But they always are very extra nice to those people. Like, you can't come to lunch with us, but afterwards you can come and have some food, and we'll give some really nice stuff, and we'll give you extra treats, and we'll sit down and talk to you. So we do love you, but you can't come and join us for the meal. You can't come to this part of the church service. So it's very interesting, but like I said, we can't practice that strictness in the so-called diaspora because we're surrounded by people who just don't get it. They just don't understand that aspect of the culture of monasticism. So there are two kinds of people who visit monasteries, basically. You can put them in two categories. Orthodox pilgrims who wish to seek to deepen their faith, and everybody else. And pilgrims who seek to deepen their faith are the majority, but everybody else is a very diverse group of people. Spiritual hospitality, in that sense, not the cup of water, but the good word. Spiritual hospitality is to use discernment and approach each person in an appropriate manner. That's why the people who are assigned to do that have that obedience of looking after guests and things like that. They need to have a bit of spiritual maturity. They need how to approach people, know how to. They can't be overzealous in talking to certain people because they make it scared. You have to take people as they come, and see with that. So not every monk is necessarily capable of this, and therefore not every monk will speak to pilgrims and visitors about spiritual topics. Some people unfortunately do come to the monasteries and they see a person in a casting thing. It's an elder, I'm going to go and talk to him. And then you get the one monk who's actually banned from speaking to people, and then be like, Holy Father, give us a good word. And he's like, okay. and then other people are like, don't do it. It can happen. So, people need to be guided into the idea that not everybody is an elder. Some monks are just here to save their souls, and they probably can't help save yours. So we need to make people realise that. So people, before they go and visit monasteries, it's best they speak to their priest and say, plan to visit a monastery sometime soon, and then the priest can say to them, well, that's good, but not many elders, so don't assume that this novice is a spiritual guru for you to learn the mystical arts of orthodox esotericism. Don't do that. So the monks who do talk to people, we need to obviously not try and give people the impression that we know the secret knowledge of salvation. We can just point to Jesus Christ. That's what we're there for. But those who seek to deepen their faith and have an encounter with living, authentic Orthodox in the monastery, the monks are there to facilitate that encounter. That's what we're there for. Those who are dealing with the guests. So, as I mentioned before, we have to have spiritual maturity, and with that should come patience, but not all the time. But we should have a lot of patience. So, people who come to seek to deepen their faith, they ask questions. They want to know about stuff. They want to know about you. How did you end up here? And they're not being intrusive. They want to know your journey, so they can think, well, am I being led to the monastic life, or am I being led to something else? These people are asking a whole bunch of things. But you need to be very, very patient with them, because they don't get the opportunity to talk to spiritual people, so-called, all the time. They have people in the parish, they have people in work they can talk to, but nobody who's totally committed to living the spiritual life completely, as you would find in a monastery. So they're chewing at the bit to learn about this, that and the other, and so they'll jump at the opportunity to talk to people, and they have an amazing capacity for conversation. It's unbelievable. sometimes you can get talking to somebody, after Compline, which is the last service of the day before you should go back to your room and say your prayers and go to bed. The person says, "Oh, Father, can you ask me something?" You end up sitting talking to this person till midnight or later than that. Very many times I've been like, right, okay, I've got 2 hours to sleep before I have to be up for church. I need to go now. You're at 2 o'clock in the morning. But sometimes people, they want a very deep conversation, and if you've got the physical capacity to keep pushing through like that, if you're there for those people, they're very grateful for it. If you tried as best as you can to answer their questions, to share experiences with them, to talk about things, and most importantly, to listen to them. They come and they want to tell you things like that. Now, like I said, not every monk is a priest and a father confessor, but every monk can listen and chat if they have a blessing to do that. But those who have, the particular obedience of spiritually or liturgically caring for pilgrims, like a priest, you must make yourself available. So if any other monk, it's like after Compline, he's wanting to go to bed, he has every right to say, right, I need to go now. But the priests, we have no excuses, unless of course you have to serve and you have to let in to go start church service now. But you need to make yourselves available for people. That's our expectation. In the words of Isaiah the prophet, "Comfort my people," says the Lord. That's our job, is to comfort people, listen to them, and give them that good word that St. Jacobus tells us about. And I'll tell you what, making yourself available for people, not just to talk to them, of course, or go for a walk with them, as I often like to do. If I like to go walking, I'll invite pilgrims to come with me, come for a stroll through the woods, go to see some nice parts of the property, and we can just talk about things. And it's a nice experience for everybody. But liturgically being available for people, some of the times where you have to really force yourself are the best experiences for both parties. Many times I've ended a long day of labours in the bakery. I'm walking back exhausted to my cellia to get some rest, because I know that I need to be up for vigil in like an hour, and I'm going to go and try and lie down for 45 minutes and catch my breath. And all of a sudden, some pilgrims come out of nowhere, and they say, "Father, can you serve a panakida for us? Can you serve a moleben for us?" And you think to yourself, "I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I've got a vigil tonight. I'm up early tomorrow to serve. I'm exhausted." But then you think to yourself, "I have no excuse to say no." Why? Because God gives you everything you need. If you push yourself, we have no limits other than, death. So, if I drop dead, then, well, that's a good thing. So I thought, okay, give me a second. And I'll go and get my book, and I'll get my Tripahelion, and we'll go and serve. And I'll tell you what, I felt so refreshed, I had so much energy, and those panikidas, those molebens were some of the most prayerful that I've experienced. And the people were always very grateful. Now, you can serve molebens and panikidas for people, and they say, "Thank you very much, Father," and, But those times when I really pushed it, I don't know if those people noticed that was almost the breaking point, or it was just that God gave so much grace to me for, doing as they asked and being there for them. But the experience was very profitable for everybody. So those are the best experiences, and not just for people like myself and Father who can serve molebens and panikidas and other needs for people, but all of us, if somebody needs your help, ask for something. Just push yourself a little bit, and you actually, again, most of the things I'm talking about here, not just for monasteries, it applies to everybody. If you push yourself for people, there's a lot that comes from that. And so a good word, an evlogia, is not just a spiritual conversation or some counsel that can come from, discussing things with monastics or people that, the people that hang around monasteries, if you will, who like to discuss spiritual stuff all the time, and you get them. But it can be confession. It can be, not what you say to them, but what they say to you. And confession. A good confession made at a monastery can be life-changing for people. A homily that they hear in the monasteries. They come to visit the monastery, they're in a context where they can hear it more. In a parish, you wake up at your home, you have to get on the tube, or you have to drive, you have to get the kids ready, you go to church, you have to deal with everything, then you leave. You're not really truly able to fully process everything. At the monastery, you're at the guest house, you wake up, it's quiet, you walk, 10 metres to the church building, everything's silent, you come to the church, and you don't have to, no responsibilities, no public transport, no cars, nothing. And you can just listen to the prayers, listen to the homily, and you're more receptive. As I said before, pilgrims come and asking for molebens, or panikidas, or going to the cemetery and praying for their relatives. These can be very moving and touching experiences for them. and just doing it for them can, again, they're in the context in which they're more receptive to the grace of God. A non-regular liturgical experience that you won't get in a parish, for example, like certain services that only take place in monasteries, or in our case we had 5 churches at the monastery. We had the cathedral, the basement, and then 3 chapels. One chapel was deep in the woods, and is quite nice to serve there. It was next to a lake, and usually when you started serving the Eucharistic canon, the sunrise would come over the lake and flood the chapel with light. So it was very, very nice experience. And sometimes for whatever reason we were allowed to serve midnight liturgies there, or we could serve liturgies, separate liturgies there. Sometimes it'd be all in English, for example, for pilgrims, because we tend to mix Slavonic and English in our services. So you do a completely English service, and many of the visitors would come to that, and the seminarians would come. And we'd do it all in Znameni chant, which is very prayerful, very close to Byzantine chant. So it was kind of out of the ordinary. And people would walk away thinking, wow, that was a really amazing service. They're in the middle of the woods, the lights come through the lake, and we're at dawn, surrounded by nature, we're praying this really kind of medieval chant, and they had a very, very prayerful experience there. Or even something quite different from that is a very informative or moving tour of the monastery, for want of a better word. But people who come and they say, well, what's things like here? What's your history? What do you people do? So we show people around. That was my obedience. I liked it a lot. Was showing people around. So if you tell people this is what we do here, this is what we believe, this is what the Orthodox Church is, tell some of the stories about the founding fathers, tell them some lives of the saints. Depends on the level of receptivity. That experience for them, just having somebody kind of telling them a lot about what we believe and things like that, can be, again, very moving for them and very powerful. If they're Orthodox already, it helps to strengthen their faith. If they're not Orthodox, it, again, can make them interested. The everyone else that I mentioned before, that can include Orthodox Christians who have simply just come out of curiosity. They're not really interested in monastic life. They're not really terribly interested in deepening their faith, but I'll come and see what it's like there. Spiritual seekers from other religions, people who are from other confessions or other religions who are seeking something, they're coming to find out more. Respectful visitors, people who know there's a monastery, they know what we are, they're not part of our church or tradition, but they want to come and respectfully stay around. And then finally, tourists, because we are next to, at least my monastery is next to Cooperstown, which is the holy city of baseball, and so it has many pilgrims over the summer. All these people coming for the Little League and all that. Thousands and thousands of people come there, and they want to explore the area. So they think, oh, there's a monastery there. It's listed on a place to go and visit. So we'll get people who come with their baseball caps on, come to check out this nice place with the golden balls on the roof of the church, and you can show love to these people as well. They're not really receptive to the spiritual thing. They just want to see some pretty buildings, some pretty pictures on the wall. Well, I'll show you these pretty pictures on the wall, and give a glass of water if you want. So again, you have to receive everybody, no matter what their intentions are. For most of these people who come, if they don't have a particular desire to find out more, if they didn't come for a particularly good reason, the visit to the monastery could be rather superficial. They come, they see, and then they go. But, however, like I said before, their experience of the Christian love and hospitality found there can be transformative. Like I said, we can make a seeker out of anybody if we do things seasoned with salt. So even the baseball people can come and go, this is interesting. Maybe when I go back to my own city, I'll have a look for an Orthodox church. I haven't seen that happen yet. Baseball is a religion in and of itself. And I'll tell you what, the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is in Cooperstown, is designed architecturally like a three-aisle basilica. It's the same shape as some of the ancient Orthodox churches, has an apse in the back, I swear, and it's full of icons or portraits of baseball players, and it's got the relics. It's got Babe Ruth's glove over here. It's got some guy's baseball bat. It's got some guy's baseball cap here. I don't think I've seen them kiss them, but that's a temple for sure. So we've got some serious competition there to be the holiest pilgrimage site in upstate New York, and I think they're winning. Because their religion's a lot easier than ours. So que sera sera. That's sports for you. But nonetheless, disinterested Orthodox people, people who are Orthodox, they go to church, but spiritual life for them is like, I say my prayers and that's it. They're fine. People, they come to the monastery. They can become interested. You get people who come, let's go to the monastery for Pascha. I've never done that before. That'd be nice, I suppose. and then they see this eruption of joy and the solemnity and this monastic community, and think, wow, this is really something. Maybe there's a lot in my religion I've not looked into. Maybe there's a lot more to being Orthodox than just turn up to church making the sign of the cross. So people can come really serious from experiencing that there. Non-Orthodox seekers who visit, who, like I said, they can find the true faith if they're open-minded and they ask questions and we talk to them. And other people who come, even the baseball people, they can get a taste of another unknown spiritual world, previously incomprehensible to them. They can come get a taste of God's grace. We here are very blessed to be in this island, which is populated by many saints. And the best of the saints, of course, are the Celtic ones. One of which is St. Columba, and his island Iona is very known as a thin place, a place where heaven and earth are very close to each other. And why is it like that? It's because the prayers of the holy men brought heaven down closer. And that's what happens at the monasteries. That heaven is a little bit more tangible. So when people go there from the world, somebody gets the train up from New York City, and then they stop by the monastery, they think, oh, it's different here. They might be a baseball guy, but something's here. And if they have a good disposition, then maybe something will happen, and we can just pray for these people. So we need to approach everybody, but what I've made up, one of my own made up terms, is non-discriminating discrimination. Mm-hmm. So yes, take everybody as they come, show love toward everybody, show hospitality to everybody, but at the same time, try to find out something unique about that person to make a connection. I love asking people, especially in America, like, what's your family background? Because I come from Scotland, everybody's Scottish. My ancestors have been in Scotland since the Scottish people arrived. It's not very interesting, But you speak to an American, or you speak to people whose families have, immigrated generations ago. Oh, where are you from? Well, my grandmother's Polish, my grandfather's Irish, It's like, okay, that's interesting. Okay, what part of Europe do they come from? What part of Poland? What part of Ireland? And you can get talking to people, because they know. Americans love researching their backgrounds, so they'll tell you exact counties and stuff. So it's a good way to make contact with people, or the Zarubezhniki, the Russian immigrants. What part of the Russian Empire did you leave? Oh, well, we left after the revolution. We went through Kazakhstan into China, then we were in Australia. Look at fascinating journeys. Well, so you can get talking to them, but you can ask them about their family experience and that. Make that connection with them. And again, this isn't just for monasteries. It's anywhere. Get to know people. They say, talking about the weather is a boring thing. But the British people, we like to talk about weather all the time. You talk about the weather with people, you get to learn about them, because, it's a sunny day today, whatever. But, people, how to respond to that, what they say about it, it can open up things, you can get a sense of their disposition and all that. So you have to be able to read people. And that's what I try to do with people who came to visit. If people ask for a tour, for example, want to come around, I would always find a way, not to be too kind of probing, but to find out what religion they were, if any. I'll say, have you ever been to an Orthodox church before? No. Do you have any experience of being in the church before? Oh, well, I'm a Catholic, or I'm a Protestant, or they go, no. So that's how I'd find out. And then that's how I'd know how to approach these people, because we need to find a way of presenting the faith to these people in a way they can comprehend. So somebody says, I'm a Roman Catholic or something like that. Well, I know that we can make a connection with these people because Roman Catholics believe in tradition and they have very many similar things to us. So I can say, we have these things and you recognise this and all that. Something's a Protestant, a bit more difficult, but if you explain the unique aspects of Orthodoxy using the scriptures, we do this and these icons are here and it says in this part of the Bible, they'll be like, okay. And as long as you know what you're talking about, you can really transmit information to these people. One of the most amazing experiences I had was when a woman comes to me and she says, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I was like, interesting. She wasn't dressed like the Hasidic woman, but she was Orthodox and she knew her Torah well. So I was like, she come here, she's got a good disposition, she's very friendly. I'll see where this goes, because what would be with people, I'd see how receptive they were to what I said, and if they kind of wanted to know more, I would go tell them more. And obviously the people who were the most interested, I would be, telling them about the incorrupt relics of saints and Marstream and icons, the most fantastical stuff that you find in the church. Fantastical because it's amazing, and fantastic, not because it's fanciful. Because some people, you hear about that and they just be like, you're talking crazy, man. But some people, they're open-minded. So this Orthodox Jewish woman, I said, I'm going to try and explain Orthodox using the Torah, and I was saying, it says you pray 7 times a day. We pray 8 times, we have these services, we fast twice a week, etc., etc. And she said, wow, that's amazing. And I was explaining the temple, the Orthodox, the church building, the temple as we call it. was in 3 sections, like Solomon's Temple. And she was like, "You're right. It's amazing. Wow. It's like I'm in the Torah right now," and it was amazing. And so I was talking about Jesus Christ and how he was the fulfillment of the prophecies and things like that. She's like, and I said we believe, trying to be a bit kind of open. So we believe that he is the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies. She's like, "I believe you." I was like, "Oh." Wow. I was like, "This is successful. I mean, this worked." So I took her. I said, like, she's really receptive. So I started telling her more and more, and telling about incorrupt relics. I was like, "Well, it's like the prophet Elisha, and his relics heal people." And she was like, "Wow, this is amazing. This is everything that we don't have anymore. What should I do?" I was like, "Go find a church and get baptized." Yeah. Like, okay. I don't know what happened, but that was probably like the most amazing experience. Was just how receptive she was, and she knew her Bible very well. So because she was able to say, yes, because this and this, and she added to it. I was quite it was very edifying. So try and find something about people, and you can engage with them in a way that makes a strong connection, because it's very good for them. So part of this, as St. Paisius the Athonite says, is he says, particularly with reference to the non-Orthodox who come, and I suppose by extension even disinterested kind of I don't know what you call them, non-practicing, non-serious Orthodox, I don't know. Our brothers and sisters who, could try a lot harder. You have to leave them, as St. Paisius says, with a good uneasiness. Not leave them, feeling despondent and destitute and offended, but they need to leave the monastery and even the parish with a sense of uneasiness. They've got something very special. I don't think I've got it. You need to, they need to walk away feeling like there's something more that they need to go towards that, to discover it, to find it out, to experience it, and I think they might have it. We don't need to.
Nearly at time.
Okay, I'm almost finished. So we should not force our faith down people's throats. I mean, Saint Paisius, the same person, says we shouldn't be, extremists. But what we can do is we can present it to them. We can show it to them. We can, again, facilitate an experience with the true faith, with Jesus Christ at the monastery, to allow them to, come to their own conclusions, to decide to look more into it, decide to to inquire, to ask questions, things like that. But we shouldn't just say, orthodoxy or death to people when they come to the monastery. It doesn't work. This experience that they have at the monastery should leave them with that good uneasiness. The uneasiness that we have, something that they don't. I mean, again, that example of the strict Athonite monasteries, those guys are in there enjoying a beautiful church service and enjoying a meal together, and I want to be part of that, That is a good, thing to cultivate in people, if it's done the right way. But the key is not to be overbearing with people, but to simply demonstrate the love of God through words and actions, i.e. hospitality. And again, the most common and kind of non-threatening way to impart that to somebody, or to facilitate that experience with somebody, is through a tour. Again, a lot of people don't like to talk about tours, and some monasteries don't even do tours per se because it's seen as too touristy. And monasteries don't want to become places for tourists to come. But I can't think of a better word to use, so I'm just going to keep using it. But showing visitors around, telling about the place, about its history, things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's a missionary aspect as well if these people are coming to find out more stuff. So many monasteries do allow this, and they do assign monks to that obedience because they know what they're talking about. They know the history, they know about the faith, they can explain things. There was one time, you need to know everything. Because I had a group of college students came, and I was talking about symbolism in the icons because that was kind of their particular interest. And I was saying everything in the icons and even in church architecture has a symbolic and deeper meaning. And I said, you could point anything out, and I might not be able to give you the answer, but it definitely has some kind of meaning. And we have a lot of stools with holes on the seat. And some girl pointed and says, "Well, what about the holes in the seat? What's the meaning?" And she was being completely serious. She says, "What's the meaning of the hole in that stool?" Good one actually. I was hoping you would ask that because there's a really deep, powerful spiritual meaning to this. She's like, "Oh, really?" and I put my finger in the hole and lifted the stool up. It was a good way of breaking the ice because they were thinking, "Wow, this guy's like a mystic or something." So it's a good way to communicate with people, but. Some monasteries don't like to do tours because they don't want to become a place where people come. unfortunately, there's a main road that drives right past us. We can't avoid it. So you have to make do. And again, not every monk has to do it, and you have to limit certain things, But of course, you have to be open to people, and we were founded as an open monastery. We had to. So telling the history of the monastery, its stories and characters, about the icons, the symbols, even the holes in the benches and the stools, can leave a powerful impression on people who at that point might have had no idea why people would commit themselves to Christ in the monastery. When you talk about the older fathers and things like that, and the struggles they went through and the holiness of them, and you come to the monastic grave and you tell about your old bishops and stuff and talk a little bit about their life, people were impressed by that. And people have come back to me later on and said, oh, when I started attending the church because of what I learned here, or things like that, they were very grateful, or just the enthusiasm that you show for what you have about the monastic life, about Orthodox faith. People are like, wow, these people really love it, and I want to know more, or I want to go deeper in my faith. We just have to be very positive. And so these experiences, these tours, they can lead to questions, deeper discussions that lead to great places. Of all the people that I met in my monastery did become Orthodox later, these people who come back later and tell you, or even write letters to the monastery to tell you the news. In most cases, their interest in Orthodoxy was sealed, or the decision to begin investigating the faith began through their encounter or the experiences at the monastery. So they came, they experienced something there, and decided to look into Orthodoxy. Or they were looking into Orthodoxy and they came and they decided, this is it. And again, a good word from the people, a beautiful liturgical experience, or just simply a realisation of the richness of our tradition was enough to convince these people. And that's what we have at the monastery, is the fullness of that. We really practice the tradition to the fullest degree. And when people experience the richness of that, they want more, and they want to deepen that. So, in conclusion, hospitality, or philoxenia, which literally means the love for the other, is a core component of the monastic life. It's a demonstration of our love for others. Well, the focus of monastic life is, of course, repentance and growing in our spiritual life. Love is a fruit of the Holy Spirit, and for monastics, we're there really only to cultivate the fruits of the Holy Spirit. We put that love into practice through primarily our brotherly love for one another in the community. But hospitality is our way that we can offer that love to outsiders as well whenever they come. Regardless of their background, whether they're Orthodox, whether they're not, whoever they are, they can come and they can receive and share in that love. And of course, that is the love of Jesus Christ that He gives to us, and we're expected to share with everybody around us. So, this is how we, some personal reflections on how monastic hospitality is and how we do it. So, I've probably gone way too long, but I hope that was edifying, and I hope you kind of got a bit of a taste of how we do things at the monastery. And I hope for those who haven't been to monasteries, you'd be inspired to come and visit and partake in that hospitality. And I do hope that your experience is positive and it's not one of the grumpy monks you meet. So I don't know how much time we have for questions, but we're going on the walk, so you can ask me when we're on the walk as well.